really like to welcome everyone that has joined here. My name is Richard and I'm from Crosspool, but I'm going to be taking a back seat today and handing over to Dinesh, who will be facilitating this panel session. Before I do that, I'd just like to remind you that if you'd like to turn on closed captioning or a live transcript, you should be able to do that by clicking the button in the bottom panel of this webinar. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dinesh. Welcome. Thank you so much for helping us out today. Please introduce yourself and the rest of the panel, and I'll hand over to you.
Hey, Richard. Thanks a lot for having me. I am talking to you from Gold Coast, Australia, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land that I join you from. My name is Dinesh. I'm a doctor working in the emergency department of the Gold Coast University Hospital, which is the busiest emergency department in the country. I'm also a lawyer. I work with organizations like the Disability Royal Commission, and I'm a scientist working on spinal cord injury research here at Griffith University. And I do a few other interesting things like being a doctor for the Gold Coast Titans disability team. So today we have a really interesting and great group of people that we're going to chat to and pick their brains about. So I'm going to get them to introduce themselves and a bit about their organization, starting with Rebecca Herbert.
Thanks, Dinesh. Hi, everyone. So I'm Rebecca Herbert. I'm a director at the Nous Group, and I'm also a board member of Tackle World Australia. I'm coming to you from the Eora Nation, and so I pay my respects to the traditional custodians, which is the Gadigal people here in Sydney. So a bit about Nous. Nous is a management consultancy firm, which basically means that we help leaders or organisations or governments solve the problems that they can't quite solve on their own. So usually that's something that, either they're not quite sure what to do about something that isn't quite right, or they'd like to do something big and exciting and they'd like our help to figure out where to start. So that's me and that's Nous, and really glad to be here with you all today.
Great, thanks Rebecca. And anyone who's dialed in, feel free to throw out any questions on the chat or Q&A, and we'll get to it as we go. So next we're gonna have Alex from PwC tell us a bit about himself and the organization.
Great, thanks Dinesh. Yeah, Alex and I are working for PwC, so one of the big four accounting and consulting firms. I lead our early careers team and are responsible for our attraction and engagement strategy when it comes to graduates, vacationers, interns, students, all things early careers, and all areas of diversity and inclusion as well, which is what I'm really passionate about. So good to see lots of you on the call, and hopefully, yeah, you've got some good questions for us.
Great, thanks Alex. And Bonnie?
Hey everyone, my name is Bonnie. I work at the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communications. So I'm sure just by our name, you can see that we cover a lot of different things. I work in the entry-level programs team here at the department, based here in Canberra. So yeah, that's about us. We're at the forefront of the Australian government's efforts to connect our communities, secure the nation's economic future, improve living standards, provide access to high quality communication services, and ensure all Australians can enjoy diverse artistic and cultural experiences and deliver projects all across Australia.
Great, thanks Bonnie. And then Patricia.
Hi, yes, I'm Patricia Parrish. I'm a career education consultant at Western Sydney University. I work with the Careers Service, which is one of these student-facing services with the university. And our university provides undergraduate and postgraduate courses across a range of different disciplines. My role is to support students to plan their future, their careers, assist with the smooth transition between being a student and into a graduate role. And my team and I do this by providing a range of information and educational resources, workshops, and individual support to students who request our help.
Well, on that note, Patricia, maybe we should start with you because this is the start of their journey, right? You're talking about graduates and their journey to work with people like Alex and Bonnie and Rebecca. Do you have any tips for these guys or any general advice on starting out their big journey?
Yeah. Look, we see a lot of students through the career service, and we run a number of programs designed specifically to help with that final step of your journey, which is of your university journey, that is, which is moving from being a university student and into a graduate role. But many of our students actually find employment also in the university sector itself, either as they move through the ranks and move into roles like academia or even within our own professional services. And I guess the most important piece of advice that I'd offer to students in this respect is to keep an open mind and try and take advantage, whilst you're at university, take advantages of programs and opportunities on campus to build your skills, especially in areas like employability. So, for example, our university at Western Sydney has a program called Jobs on Campus, and this is a program where we provide opportunities for students to pick up short-term paid roles within the university, and that gives you an opportunity to work while you study, and have a bit of income coming in, which is great. But it also means that you also get that really valuable experience which is about working in an office environment, learning what it's like to work in a team, learning what it's like to build your skills in communication and problem solving, and getting involved generally with professional life and the culture that goes with that, what it's like to be on the other side of the fence as a student. So you might be a student today, but tomorrow you're going to be in the office providing services to other students. So I really encourage you as a careers professional to try and get some relevant experience before you start looking at graduate jobs, because the thing that will make you really stand out and make you really valuable to a future employer is that you can say, oh, actually, I've done something like this before. And oh yes, I understand what you're talking about when you talk about teamwork and working together collaboratively. I know that stuff because I've done a little bit of this before. So that's probably the most important thing I'd like to point out. And if you have any doubts about that, just contact your local career service, whatever university you're coming from, have a chat to them about the supports and the programs and opportunities that they have on offer, and use them. Jump in there, take advantage as much as you can.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. Starting with the basics, it really helps. My first job was at McDonald's and also stuffing chickens at the IGA. So chicken stuffing to being a doctor, I still learned a lot of the basic skills that I need to learn, and I think it's important. So can we go to Bonnie, perhaps? And Bonnie, you work in the federal government. It's a department that really changes the country and adds so much to it. Can you tell us a bit about what you look for in people that are applying to work with you?
Absolutely. So I guess what we look for the most is people who can be flexible to change and are keen to be, jump in the deep end, be challenged and learn new skills. I guess in the application, we look for people who have a really good attitude, strong communication skills, and people who can work well in a team. We look for people who have a passion about the department. So it's always really good to try and do some research before you apply, and maybe have a look through an agency's website on some projects that they're working on and how you can link your skill set to the work of the department, and provide some really good examples and evidence of how you can do that. So it's really good to say you have skills, but in an application, we really look for why you have those skills and how you have applied those in the workplace. So and I guess as well, what we look for in application is some good structure, clear and concise. And a big tip for us is make sure you read it out loud to someone, because sometimes, I know I do this, I'll type something and I'll read it 1,000 times and it makes sense to me, but I'll send it to my supervisor and they go, oh, that hasn't made the most sense. So have a read back through and just read it out loud to someone as well. So I guess that's what we look for in application.
I can't agree more. And some of the simple things really matter. I've been on a few interview and recruitment panels for various things. And for one of our projects, we received around 200 applications. And we pretty much culled anyone who didn't mention the project by name. and sent a very generic cover letter. So I think basic things like that matter.
It's really easy the skills you learn at university and at school to be able to transfer them over to just those foundational fundamental skills really help.
Thanks, Bonnie. So there's someone, Miranda, who is from Career Services at Uni SA, is exploring the possibility of being a career advisor. Could she connect with you, Patricia, at some point?
Definitely. If you've got an interest, if you're at the Uni of South A, though, you'll also have your own career service there that could advise you. And you know what? That's how I got my job in this sector. I came from a different sector and I was doing some postgrad study at my university. So I booked a consultation with one of the careers consultants at my university, and I came in and I had a chat with this fellow, and he said, well, what are your goals? I said, I want your job. How do I get your job? And he gave me some really good advice. So I do recommend you have a chat with other career advisors. So the career advisors at your university is a great place to start. But definitely, if you want to reach out, you can contact me as well if you'd want to talk to someone you've already met before. But I would be advising to take advantage of those guys who are right there at your university.
Great. There's another question from an anonymous attendee about SLES and DES providers. Do any of our panelists have any experience or thoughts on that at all? Rebecca, you smiled. Do you have any?
Well, not working directly as part of a provider, but I spent 3 years as working my consulting capacity, working with the SLES team. And so trying to really improve the student experience of SLES. And so my observation, and this is something that, as I'm sure you're all aware, we could write books on, we could spend all day talking about this, but I promise I won't bore you with everything Beck thinks about SLES and DES. But I'd say my biggest observation there is, and it's one about government more broadly, and I'm sure Bonnie would have thoughts about this as well, is we need to be more connected in the way that we deliver services, and be connected in the way that as a citizen, as a student, we rarely care about which part of government is delivering the service. So I don't really care if it's the ATO or Centrelink or Department of Social Services or who I'm talking to. I just care about getting the service. And so I think the big opportunity, at least when I was working in the SLES space, was to have that better connected experience. So you don't feel like you're in SLES and then you're in DES. It's just, here's my career journey and what supports are available to help me navigate that. Is that helpful? Does that answer the question?
Yes, and I won't go into what Dinesh thinks about DES. So
maybe we should have a separate
we'll have
podcast,
a separate
Dinesh, about
Alex, can you tell us a bit about how a student could land a job with you at PwC? It's a very competitive and highly sought after organization to work in as well. So do you have any thoughts on how people could stand out?
Yeah, I think nothing new. What we're looking for, as Bonnie has mentioned, is someone who's passionate about the kind of work that they do. In terms of the application, similar to what Bonnie said, make sure that you, essentially in an application, we want you to tell us what we do, what we're about, what our values are, and what we're about, and then how that matches with what you want to achieve in your career. Also, just sort of, it's very difficult at the moment, that having a profile in industry and getting involved in events such as this are a really great way to have a profile with recruiters. So do take any opportunity you can to connect with recruiters. Obviously, perhaps not in this particular format, but when there are opportunities for you to, attend events in person, make sure you make the most of those, or even if they're virtual, being brave and asking a question, just so that you've got that, interaction with someone from the industry. So I think those are kind of my key ones. And then outside of that, one that I think is particularly pertinent during COVID and all of those difficult things is use your network. So use and abuse your network. If you know someone who works at PwC or at Department of Infrastructure, ask them to put in a referral for you, because that's an additional data point. If someone from PwC thinks you're great and lets my team know, that's an extra person vouching. So that's one more data point we have that you're a good match. So do use and abuse your networks.
I can't agree more. Networks are very important in everything that we do. I think these days we sometimes tend to undervalue the importance of relationships. So
and I think as well, it's one of those things you probably hear about at uni but don't understand the value. After my first, or even my first job that I got was through my network, and then I've never applied for a role since then. Every job has come through my network. So I thought it was not a real thing at uni as well, but then I can see the power of it. So definitely invest in that.
And it helps to get work done as well when you're subsequently working between organizations and within organizations. We've got a couple of questions that I think maybe all of our panelists could help with. And I think the two are related. So how would you disclose your disability in an interview as a student? Would it be a turnoff for recruiters and human resources? And then what happens if you apply for jobs and you're denied purely on the basis that the company does not want to help accommodate with disability needs? First of all, if any of you guys are experiencing that, please feel free to email me and I will personally look at some avenues for you. But in the meantime, I wonder if the panelists have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I really hope that the person who asked that hasn't had to experience that. And if they have, I am really sorry that you've had to go through that. I am in HR at the Department of Infrastructure. That would never be a turn off for me. For me, I would like to either receive it in advance if you're comfortable in doing so, or just tell us when you come in, and yeah, we can accommodate to you as best as we can. But yeah, please don't ever feel like that it would be a turn off, and if it ever is, then I don't think that is the best agency to work for anyway, because there's definitely other agencies out there that will be, so welcoming and really would love to have you in their agency.
Yeah. So I think I've got to say too that if there's an organization that doesn't want to be inclusive, it's probably not worth working for. One of the biggest things that I value every single day is that our emergency department, even though it's the busiest in the country, we see over 100,000 patients a year. It is one of the most inclusive places that I've ever seen. So no one really asks about disability, sexual identity, whatever. It doesn't matter. We all just work together, and it's a happy place to work despite the pressures that we face. So I think culture matters, and you need to pick an employer that's inclusive and that you can fit in.
I'll just add there quickly.
Yeah.
I think disclosing your disability is definitely a personal thing, but I think disclosing it at a point where make sure you do disclose it at a point where if not disclosing it is not going to set you up for success. So if you need an adjustment made, at psychometric test time, for instance. So we'll always contact anyone who requests a reasonable adjustment to check what that is. But I think disclosing it, until, you know, is very much your choice up until it puts you at a disadvantage. So I know I'm rabbiting on, but I've got an example from a previous role where I put a candidate forward who was on the spectrum and didn't disclose. And so they didn't get that job because the interviewer was like, oh, they didn't make eye contact. They seemed a bit distracted, And then I found out from that candidate that they then wanted to disclose their disability. So put them forward for another area. With that knowledge, they loved the candidate and hired them. So by not disclosing that particular candidate, unwillingly had probably put themselves at a disadvantage because that interviewer kind of needed to know that. And yeah, when the interviewer knew that, they absolutely loved him. So I think just assessing at what stage it's going to set you up for success is important.
Yeah, another question that's come up is, should we also disclose mental health disabilities? And it's, yeah, I think it's a very personal thing, but it's probably along the same lines as well. And again, I think that because sometimes you might be working for these organizations for 10, 20 years, doing 8, 10 hours a day. So do you really want to be in a place where people don't accept that you've gone through something or that you're unique in some way or whatever? I don't think, I think those are the organizations that we can put aside. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that. But
we spend so much of our lives at work, and I just think it's really important to make sure that you're somewhere that you really enjoy, that you're, and I doubt that you'll be able to really enjoy it if they don't accept you. And I mean, we all say you should bring your whole self to work. I think you should bring as much of yourself to work as you're comfortable with. You shouldn't feel pressured to disclose anything, whether it be disability or you know, sexual orientation. My colleagues didn't know I was queer for the first couple of years that I was at work, because I didn't think it was particularly relevant. And obviously, you know, very different things. But there's all these organisations are used to having these conversations. And if they're not willing to have them, they're not worth your time. Yeah,
and really, like, how is anyone's sexual preference relevant at any organization? So, so we had a bunch of good questions, and thanks guys for being so interactive. So I have different interests between career and education. Therefore, my work experience looks different from my graduate certificate. How can I make both beneficial for my job search?
I'd be happy to answer that one.
Yeah.
This is a conversation I have a lot with students. Students have work experience across a variety of different contexts. Sometimes it's related, sometimes it's not. And even Dinesh, as you said, you did some work in McDonald's or you know, in the IGA stuffing the chickens. All types of work have relevant skills that you are picking up along the way. Your job as a applicant or a candidate for a graduate role is to make sense of that in terms of the new employer. So when you've had your work experience perhaps as in McDonald's and you're applying for a role in an office environment, then what the new employer is interested in is things that you learned on that job that you can transfer to the new context. That could be communication skills. It could be working as part of a team. It could be problem solving. It could be providing good customer service. There's a whole range of skills that you learn and you employ in whatever work situation you're in, that you then can translate a story from that situation and say, this is what demonstrates my skills in this area, whether it be, you know, communication skills or my problem solving skills or my good organization skills. You know, pick some really good stories from that workplace and say, this is why I'm going to be good for your company, because I've had this experience and I had a really good result. So my advice to you in that situation is to think about any of the experiences you've had. That could be paid, unpaid, it could be community-based, it could be volunteer, whatever it is. Think about those experiences in terms of all the little stories in there that you could tell that show your skills and your readiness to move into the new role. So it doesn't really matter if it's not related. It's good to get some related experience, but it doesn't matter if you've got any experience at all, it's going to be useful for you. So yeah, it's great that you've got experience.
we got a bunch of good questions coming through, but sadly, I think with 6 minutes, we'll have to pick out a few. But I think all the panelists are going to be in booths after this session. Is that correct? Yeah. No, not Alex, but Bonnie will be, and not Rebecca. But Patricia? No. All right, so you can go and hound Bonnie. So after this session, maybe if you still got questions, you can, there'll be people to chat to. And I'm sure I'll be happy to receive emails with whatever I can help with if you look me up on Griffith or socials. And I'm sure some of the other panelists might be happy to be contacted if you're interested in their organization or some words of advice as well. Okay. So another question, how do I even pick? These are all great questions. How do organizations choose the successful candidates after interviews? I have received positive feedback from interviewers, but often haven't passed on to the final stage. So they just want to know how they pick the best candidates.
I think if I can kind of jump in there with potentially what might be a useful example. If consulting is right for you and you're right for consulting, then you could come and work with me, or you could come and work with Alex at PwC. But at that final stage, what we're trying to figure out is NOUS right for you, or is PwC right for you? Because they're very different places, and every organisation has its own culture, which will make it a very different place to work. And so at that final stage of interview, at least from what we're looking at, were you really passionate about working at NOUS, or were you just really passionate about working in consulting and we think that you could succeed elsewhere? Now that doesn't mean that we won't give you a job, because hey, we'd love you to choose NOUS, but that's where you kind of go from the will you succeed to is this the best place for you? And what we usually do is have a second conversation to just tease that out. So it wouldn't mean that you don't get another interview or that you don't get the job, but that's that critical question we're asking at the end.
I might jump in as well. I know it can feel a bit disheartening when you're getting really positive feedback, but you haven't been made an offer. That doesn't mean that you haven't done well. It just means that the process was maybe really competitive. And usually, I know for public service that there's a selection report and usually gets scored on each aspect of each question of the interview. So generally, the cutoff line for those scores will be where they make offers for those who have scored over X amount. So you might be just under the cusp, or there might only be, X amount of positions available. So yeah, you might not have just scored just quite high enough, but please don't be disheartened. These are so competitive. Sometimes you can apply for multiple until you make it through. So just keep trying, keep asking for feedback, and yeah, hopefully you'll make it through the next time.
Recruitment's an incredibly heartbreaking process sometimes because you have to pick from so many amazing people. Just really quickly, I wonder, there's been a few questions touching on the topic of adjustments in the workplace. I wonder if any of the panelists have some advice on what kind of adjustments they might consider or make.
My advice would be just have the conversation early. So for example, a team member that I work with has chronic fatigue syndrome. And so her adjustments are about her hours. And so we've put in place different hours for her, and everyone on the team knows that she works different hours. Some people know why, some people don't. That's her choice. But it's just a conversation. For other colleagues, it's about heaters at desks. It could be about a standing desk. It could be all of our offices are accessible. So there's some things that are baked in, but we have a lot of different adjustments for a lot of different people, and it's just about asking and us figuring out what that looks like. And with remote working, it's a bit different, but we will eventually be back in offices.
Yeah, and I think to wrap up, I'd like to really thank the panelists today. I think they're a good example of inclusive organizations and positive attitudes represented here. So please reach out to them. I think the few takeaways would be to try and look for organizations that are inclusive, that have a positive attitude, that will value you for you, because each and every one of you have so much to offer and there's so much value, and you have the ability to value add to an organization. Diverse organizations are more profitable, innovative, and happy. So you can add to that, and don't go into an organization who don't feel that way. If people are being difficult, there are all sorts of different avenues. So there is legal protection for people that have been discriminated against. So even consider those, because the more we hold people accountable, the less these kind of things happen. And there are programs like the Human Rights Commission's includability program, which really seeks to make employers inclusive. So thank you again for everyone for joining us, and thanks to the panelists for your thoughts and wisdom, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
For joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, Dinesh, for that. Excellent questions coming through. Really, really good discussion. You can now go back to the homepage of this fair and you can find an employer to talk to. I know there'll be representatives from NOWS, PwC, and the Department of Infrastructure waiting to talk to you. So go in and have a chat to them. If you have lost that link, I'll just pop that in the chat now. You can access all the employers via that link as well. Again, very big thank you to all of our panelists and our fantastic facilitator, Dinesh. Really, really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and best of luck with your applications.